Sirpa Pietikäinen, MEP for the European Parliament for the last 8 years. Now, you just made a speech in one of the sessions in the conference on personalised medicine, and you said there should be more patient rights legislated at the European level. Not only a declaration, but legislative rights. And another point you highlight, there should be healthcare in the EU treaty. Could you just elaborate on these 2 points?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that the EU, from the beginning, was for the people. It was created not only for the business, but the business was created to form a better environment for the people. And now it is the latest part for us to make it true. And that is, of course, the part of constitutional rights. And one quite crucial of it is that we have a right for good treatment when we are ill. We have a right to access to medical advocacy. We have a right to diagnosis. We have a right to best treatment. That then again is a bit of a different question, who is paying and how much for it. But at least we have the right to know what is the best and most effective treatment. We have the right to choose. We have the right for rehabilitation, and we have the right to have different kind of second opinions and to search the treatment in some other member states also.
And can the Europeans support the member states to do this?
I think it can very strongly do it. By our alone we are pretty small, be it the development of medicines, be it the clinical trials, be it medical devices. But if we pool our forces together, we are a big intelligent force, then that can create the intelligence, the testing, the speeding up of new, better treatment methods and more personalized medicines and treatments. And I think we should do it.
Jesus Ruda, Director of International Affairs for MedTech Europe, EUCOMED, EDMA. So now we have the revision of in vitro diagnostics and the medical devices. And it's all happened quite quickly. Other legislations were on track to be revised, data protection and clinical trials. But then they decided to revise this in vitro diagnostics and medical devices. Could you just give us the background of why the revision took place, where we are now, and what do you think the likely outcome of this revision will be?
So the revision takes place because the original IVD directive that was published in 1998 was published before many of the massive changes that have happened in the diagnostics industry. If you look at the changes over the past 20 years, technology has evolved significantly. We have many more tests than what we did at that time, and new technologies have come online, such as diagnostic technologies and information technologies. So the way we use the internet, the way we communicate data and share data is much more different from what we had back in the day. And so given that software has become much more important in interpreting diagnostic results, and given that many of the jurisdictions around the world were developing new systems to do this, it became necessary to revise it to bring the IVD regulation really up to speed with the realities of the diagnostics industry today. And where we are today with the discussions is quite simply we are working in a situation where we're at the last stage of the trilogue negotiations between Council, Parliament and the Commission. All of the different legislators have put forward their proposals, and we're at the stage where we're finalizing the last compromises. So it's quite possible that in the course of the next few months we will see a final revised text of a new regulation. And that regulation going forward in the future is going to be the roadmap on how IVDs come to the market in Europe. And one of the many important things that are coming up is that companion diagnostics get called out specifically. So personalized medicine that 20 years ago was not on anybody's horizon has now become an integral part of the regulation. And it's something that is being put in place, but is being put in place in a way that's technology neutral. So regardless of the advances that we will see in the future, we will have mechanisms to continue to regulate and place on the market diagnostic tests that support personalized medicines. And this is really important because at times there was a whole ream of discussions as to whether it should really be very specific, very technical, and it managed to stay at a level that will enable development of new technologies for the next 15, 20 years. And we fully expect that the new regulation will last the 15, 20 years of development in the diagnostic field.
A lot of you say that the revision is technological neutral. But a lot of legislation tends to be reactive, and the medical device in vitro diagnostics regulation or revision was reactive to a certain issue that happened in France. In this revision, do you see that the revision will facilitate an environment for personalised medicine, or it will be, or is it reactive? Is it being more proactive type of legislation?
I think that if implemented properly, and this is something that still remains to be seen, it will facilitate the regulatory hurdles that exist for personalised medicine, in the sense that it becomes more clear what people need to do. One of the issues that we see today is that the situation is very much ad hoc. When we come to diagnostic tests, the Medicines Agency wants more or less information, and different drug companies expect more or less from their diagnostic partners. So it's a little bit nebulous as to exactly what is needed. With this regulation coming online, all of this becomes much more concrete. So that certainty is going to facilitate access to the regulatory process, even though it might mean a little bit more investment and a little bit more rigor in the way that the products come to the market, which is not a bad thing in itself.
Today we have a conference on taking stock, where to go in personalised medicine, and what are the necessary next steps. You're from Genomics England. Can you just tell us what is Genomics England and what is the 100,000 Genome Project?
So Genomics England is a private company wholly owned by the UK Department of Health with a remit to be the delivery agency for the 100,000 Genomes Project. It's doing that in partnership with the NHS, with Illumina, also with a variety of academics. And basically at its core, it's to undertake 100,000 genomes with NHS patients by 2017. Half of those are with families with rare diseases, and the other half are people with cancer. So really, it's in many ways a transformative program that's actually to both provide a really high fidelity research data set, while at the same time pushing forward our healthcare systems so that we're able to use genomic technology.
So the UK is taking a lead on this within Europe. Is Genomics England and the 100,000 Genome Project an example that some member states of the EU should follow?
I think it's certainly an example that you should follow. There's a lot of really key learning in it. I mean, one of the reasons why it's actually possible is because it's done it on such a large scale. By setting the ambition, it's actually meant that the economies of scale mean that you can actually start to seriously think about applying this, not just in a research setting, but in a healthcare setting as well. And actually, I truly believe that patients will benefit from the work and the legacy of actually having infrastructure that's developed to learn how to use this type of technology. It's really being used to drive up the standards across our healthcare system in terms of this particular space.
And there's a lot of one of the outcomes here was that public health experts should be more aware of what's happening in genomics, and it was a merging of the two terms in terms of public health genomics. As Director of Public Health for Genomics England, what steps should we do to educate the broader stakeholders, patients, medical professionals, healthcare planners about genomics?
Oh, now there is a very interesting question. One of the key aspects of the 100,000 Genomes Project, which will leave towards the legacy, is that 24 million was put into something called Health Education England, which is the body that trains up our healthcare professionals. That's both medics, but also across the board in terms of healthcare professionals. That's been used in a number of different aspects, but including a variety of genomics medicine masters that have been put in place across across of England. And I think that will lead to the real legacy of improving and upskilling people in terms of learning how to use this technology. And actually, I will say that I think it's it's the workforce legacy that will make the difference rather than the technology, because being able to use this technology is changing all of the time, whereas the skills to use it, what we really need to develop.
Nikos Evangelistas, critical care specialist, medical doctor in Germany. In the conference, we mentioned different types of data, big data, proteomic data, etc. But in the day-to-day, when you practice in the hospital, what does these terms mean for you? And what kind of infrastructure needs to support this to deliver the right treatment for the right patient at the right time?
Well, I also have the same question, because we have spoken about data, proteomics, genomic, metabolomic, and so on. But we don't have the same idea as to what the word data means. For example, are genomic data and clinical data the same? Because genomic data are a capability that waits to be kind of realized in the real world, where clinical data are here. So in the ICU setting, we use clinical data, and I know that in some neonatal ICUs they use genomic data because there's the need to diagnose as soon as possible newborns with inherited diseases or inborn errors of metabolism. But in the ICU setting for adults, we rely on clinical data and not that much on genomic data. So I think we are a little far from the implementation of omics and big data in the ICU setting at this point.